Let's see here. Who's next over there? Pledge of Allegiance. Jeremy? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Roll call, please.
Douglas Beebe. Here. Jeremy Connors. Here. Kimberly Erlin. Here. Patty LaFlemme. Here. Cheryl McKenzie. Here. Ed Marin.
Here.
Courtney Miller. Here. Crystal Palmer. Here. Nicole Pufor. And Riley Workin.
All right. All right. Approval of the agenda. Your motion, please. Sure. Second? And any questions on the agenda? All in favor? Aye. All right. We don't need a clerk pro tem, so I'll just read this and then you can make some comments before we vote. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, resolved that the Board of Education enter executive session to discuss proposed pending or current litigation, the medical, financial credit, or employment history of a particular person, persons, or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person, or persons, or corporation, and the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property, or the proposed acquisition, sale, or exchange of securities but only when publicity would substantially affect the value of these things. Motion.
I'll motion.
Crystal. Second?
Second.
Courtney. All right.
A little background?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be going into executive session. Christopher Langlois from the Gerber Palazzo firm will be joining us via remote connection to talk about closing out the capital project and pending litigation, I guess it would be called. And then we also have some executive session today to talk about tenure appointments, people who are up for tenure. That's something the board has historically liked to do. And so we start that process. We might start it before the meeting, stop, and then come back in, because we also bring in the admin and they talk about their employees too. Okay? I think that's it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. That's it. So we're in executive session. Resolve the Board of Education return to regular session at 6:16. Motion, please. Jeremy. Second? Tim. All right. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. We're in regular session. Okay, presentations. First one, cybersecurity. Please.
Almost there. That's what happens when we leave the room. Rick, can you just do a Windows P?
Well, they're getting ready.
Yes.
I'm just going to do some introductions and review a couple items. So Gary's our Director of 21st Century Learning. He's been with the district, it's not 30 years, it's
29 years.
How many years?
29.
29 years. And Rick is formerly worked at NARIC at our district. He was stationed at our district, and then he decided to work for us. He's our Chief Information Officer and really maintains our systems and make sure that we keep things up and running. Together they work as a team. I'm sure that they talk, they work right next to each other, they work well. It looks like they're ready to go.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Vic. I had to check the cable out the wall. First thing I should have checked the cable. So I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to the board and the community about cybersecurity at Beekmantown Central School District. I'm Gary. This is Rick. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about the history of cybersecurity and progress that we've made at Beekmantown. But the first question that we thought of when we were working on this presentation was, why is this important? And I think that's a good starting point for all of us. And we came up with three main reasons. And the first of those was that education is, if not the top, is one of the top most targeted sectors of all the sectors, more so than healthcare, more so than the government. Education consistently is a target for the bad actors. And unfortunately, the second reason, it's not going away anytime soon. In fact, it's more than likely going to continue to increase year after year. So we need to remain vigilant. And the last part of it is, again, why does this matter? Why are we presenting to the school board? Because everybody has a role to play. This is not just an IT issue. This is a cultural issue. This is something that we all need to be involved in order to heighten our security posture. So some of you are familiar with his name, Kevin Mitnick. He's a famous hacker turned security consultant, analyst. And basically, Kevin is saying what we believe is that we will always do everything we can within our power to mitigate risk and increase our defenses. But please note that there is never a 100% guarantee that you will be that step ahead of the bad actors. But that doesn't mean just because you can never prevent all risk that you shouldn't do everything in your power to prevent as many risks as you possibly can. So that's kind of a starting point for us. So we are two people in a department of 4, and we were fortunate to have engaged with the Wish-We BOCES a couple of years ago, Cecilia Dempsero-Rumley, who is our shared data privacy officer. And Cecilia actually we were talking to her last week, and she asked if she could mention a couple of things because we consult with her on a very regular basis, and she wanted to share some comments with the board that will help us set the table for the remainder of the presentation, if you will indulge us.
Good evening, Superintendent Mannix, Board of Education President Barron, members of the Board of Education, and the Beekmantown school community. I'm Cecilia Dempsero-Rumley, Assistant Director for Data Privacy and Professional Learning at Wish-We BOCES, and collaborative partner with Mr. Gary Lambert and Mr. Rick Gangler in our collective effort to ensure data privacy and cybersecurity protection within our schools. I'm appreciative of the invitation to contribute to their updated presentation for all of you this evening, and I apologize in advance for not being able to be with you in person. The Wish-We BOCES Data Privacy and Security Support Service was launched in February 2020, and Beekmantown was one of 17 districts that joined the COSER that year. Our service currently supports 22 districts along with our BOCES and continues to grow. We share the common goals of minimizing risks and vulnerabilities, strengthening our cybersecurity posture, and ensuring that our students have access to innovative learning opportunities. Gary, Rick, and I work as a collaborative team, and I value that we share a fundamental belief that these new regulations were more than compliance-driven. Safeguarding student data is a critical action that every employee in a school district needs to actively embrace because student data is sought after for both corporate and criminal use, and we need to become cultures of data privacy. It's important to know that Beekmantown School District has served as a model for others in our Wish-We Data Privacy COSER and within the larger NARIC region, as all of our districts struggle with responding to the prolonged pandemic, ensuring access and accessibility to instructional technology, and strengthening the existing cybersecurity posture of the technology networks and systems. Other districts have looked to Beekmantown to learn how to implement a technology software request, vetting, and approval process so that access to innovative learning does not compromise privacy and security protections. NARIC data privacy staff showcased the Beekmantown data privacy and security webpage as a model of public communication for its stakeholders last year during a monthly data privacy officer meeting. Despite the demands on time, Gary, Rick, and I worked last spring and summer to conduct a comprehensive assessment of the district's technical, administrative, and physical security controls. A 3-year action plan aligned with the NIST cybersecurity framework was developed that clearly identifies the strengths, vulnerabilities, and risks within the current systems and structures. The plan prioritizes the targeted actions and tasks needed to ensure the district's cybersecurity posture. As a result, Beekmantown was one of the first 4 districts in our Wish Me DPS service to finalize their plan and begin implementation this year. Many of the highlights that they're sharing with you this evening are indicators of progress of this planning work. I appreciate the student-centered focus that is so clearly communicated throughout our shared work. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes of your time to acknowledge the adaptive leadership exemplified by both Gary and Rick. They bring synergy to solving complex and complicated issues in an emerging digital threat landscape to our K-12 school systems. It's a pleasure to work in collaboration with them to support your district needs. Thank you for your time this evening.
So, Cecilia's comments actually helped really set the table for the rest of this presentation because what we'd like to talk about, she mentioned the NIST framework, and I know most of you are not familiar with that framework and what it is. We want to talk a little bit more about the procedures we've put in place, programs and PD, and also that timeline in history, as well as what's left, because this is an ongoing process.
So I'm not quite as good as Gary when it comes to speaking off the cuff, so I can use my notes a little bit. So forgive me, I'm kind of tight here from the line.
Can you hear him okay? Okay.
Yep. Okay. So a brief, a 20,000-foot view of what the NIST cybersecurity framework is a set of standards, best practices, recommendations for improving cybersecurity and risk management. The 5 key functions of this are the identity function, which assists in understanding what the cybersecurity risks are to systems, people, assets, and data. The protect function, which limits or contains the impact of a potential cybersecurity event. The detect function, which enables timely discovery of cybersecurity events. The respond function, which outlines the ability to contain the impact of a potential cybersecurity incident. And the recover function, which supports timely recovery to normal operations to reduce the impact from the cybersecurity incident.
So the 3 Ps, procedures, programs, and PD. Starting with the processes, we speak a lot about repeatable, predictable processes here in the district. And we're going to highlight some of those processes specifically that we put into place as part of cybersecurity. Second are the applications, the types of programs and services that we've put in place, what they do, why they're there. And then the training. The human element, unfortunately, is one of those variables that is even more difficult for us to control than the computers because there's so much variability in the human element. But without training, we're spending resources on the district, and it could be the weakest link that is causing the vulnerabilities to happen in the first place. So we're going to jump back. 2016, 2017, 17, and 18. First foray into cybersecurity in the district. I see a couple teachers in the room. You guys were both here at that time. We did 2 presentations, actually, Rick and myself, about cybersecurity. It was the first introduction that our staff had to multi-factor authentication, the first foray into phishing schemes, the first discussion of ransomware. This is back in 16 and 17. Not as many people were talking, but it feels like 100 years ago. But we were starting to get employees in the district aware that cybersecurity was part of their responsibility in addition to everything else that they do. Jumping ahead to 18-19, we don't always think about it, but physical security is actually an integral part of the NIST framework as well. So all of our data clauses, server room, we're then equipped with proxy card readers, just like the ones that get you access into the building. And the advantage of that is not only physical security, but the audit trail of who's in and who's out, and the ability to disable access if somebody loses a card or otherwise, for the same reasons that we use it elsewhere. So we're seeing a couple steps each of those years. What I think you're going to see as we progress is a building of we're doing more and more and more and more. So 1920, start of the pandemic year. This is a fundamental year for us because this is the year that the district commissioned a security audit. Third-party, outside group, very, very skilled at what they do. They looked at everything. They peeked under the hood. They looked at our charging stations. They looked at our servers. They looked at everything. And out of that security audit came some really impactful recommendations that we put into place right away. And the best part of it is most of those recommendations are ones that we had been advocating for anyway, but now there were some teeth behind it. And the first one that I want to mention is the Google account multi-factor authentication. You're all familiar with it because you all use it. But back then, very few people were using it in our district. And why that is so important, Rick's going to use the same term, low-hanging fruit. That this enabling multi-factor authentication can mitigate anywhere from 80 to 90% of all ransomware attacks by just turning it on. So it's kind of like putting a security system in your home. If you make it more difficult to get into your home, it's not impenetrable, but the burglar will move on to a less secure household. That's the same with MFA. It's not, you can defeat it, there are ways to defeat it, but they're going to move on to somebody who doesn't have it enabled. And just for reference, this is 1920. Most of our neighboring school districts, I'm not mentioning names, but there are quite a few of them, are just enabling MFA with their staff this year. We did it in 3 months at the beginning of 1920, and I can tell you right now, nobody gets an account at Beekmantown unless they enable MFA, period. Student, teacher, intern, contractor, it doesn't matter. If you get an account at Beekmantown, you have MFA enabled.
So referencing the security audit that Gary mentioned, the superintendent and I began meeting shortly after the results were returned to the district. And again, we identified some of the low-hanging fruit that would make some of the biggest impacts on what we can do to fix some of the things that were not up to par. One of those was updating the software and hardware that we were using for backing up the physical and virtual servers, both on-site and off-site in the cloud. We also implemented Cisco Umbrella, which is a tool for users while browsing the internet. On an individual level, it protects against malware, phishing attacks, command and control, and ransomware. And on a district level, it allows us to enforce web browsing policies by blocking access to certain websites, either explicitly or via categories.
So now 2021, we're in the thick of the pandemic, but cybersecurity is rising to a new level because where were our students? Many of them were at home, and electronic delivery or digital delivery of instruction meant higher risk for a lot more users because that information was being transmitted freely. So this is where we really rolled up our sleeves. For those of you that are not familiar, I think many of you are, but New York State enacted a law called EdLog 2D, which deals with student data privacy. And we developed a process in-house that Cecilia referenced, whereby any piece of software in the district that is desired to be used by a staff member, and the principals all know this because they're involved in the process, as well as the staff. The staff have to fill out it's not an exhaustive form, but it is a comprehensive form so that we understand who's going to be using it, how is it going to be used, but most importantly, what kind of standards does that vendor have for student data privacy, and where is their privacy policy? We meet on a weekly basis every Friday at 10 o'clock, and we vet any of those requests before we pass them on to Cecilia for her to obtain the privacy agreements with the vendor. And I will tell you, most of these pieces of software, there's no issues, but we found instances where had we not been doing our due diligence, the vendor actually says in their privacy policy, I'm thinking of one particular piece of software, that they not only sell and rent the user information, it's right there in the privacy policy if you bother to read it, but they also take no responsibility for any of the links within their site whatsoever. So you're kind of on your own. So we find that out during the discovery process. And I know all of you were very, very diligent when you click through that end user licensing agreement and every single thing. We actually are the ones that are looking at that for the district. So it's not exciting work, but it's important work because probably the biggest thing that we have as a responsibility is maintaining our students' right to privacy with their own personally identifiable information. So that process began. It feels like, again, it was a long, long time ago, but it was only 2 years ago. We also, Cecilia referenced in this action plan. So we did a fairly exhaustive self-assessment of looking honestly at where we were for all of these different elements of the framework and where we needed to be. And from that assessment, we developed an action plan that we refer back to every day. It's not a policy, it's an action plan. So we use it to guide our actions, to build upon the foundations of things that we've already done, and look at things that we still need to work on. So that's our guiding document. And an example of this is this miscellaneous staff onboarding. Now, prior to the adoption of this particular thing, again, the principals and the staff know this very well, we had instances where, and it's not to expose, wrongdoing or anything, but it's just processes that are developing and ongoing. You might have a contractor that worked on this very LGI who we were asked to create an account for. But that same person who asked for it never followed up to say that person is done now. So their account would have been hanging out there. This process identifies everybody. Coach, intern, student teacher, YMCA, you name it. If they don't appear in that spreadsheet, they don't get building access, they don't get email, they don't get any login access whatsoever. And that's the accountability piece for us because we're the gatekeepers. So we have to ensure that the people we're giving access to, we know when does it start and when does it end and what kind of access do they need. So there's a process that grew directly out of that security audit, which made us take a look at the NIST framework and then made things better at Beekmantown. So the last thing I will mention before I turn it back over to Rick, our SIS, or Student Information System, is School Tool. Now, for a number of years, in fact, I believe we were the first in New York State to do this, we used Google for a single sign-on because it's more secure. And at a certain point, Capital Region BOCES said, we want to do away with the older, less secure way of logging in. We had already, about 6 months prior, gone through and audited every account in School Tool and removed the less secure manner of logging in and communicated with staff that the only way they could log in was logging in with Google. We were the first one to get a clean bill of health with NARIC, saying that we were ahead of the game there. So many different elements to this, but all fitting into the total puzzle of cybersecurity. Now, this is the one that Rick gets excited about.
Yeah, this one is actually the one that allowed me to finally sleep through the night since we started this whole process. Crowdstrike, which is, most people know what antivirus is. This is actually a next generation antivirus, or endpoint protection actually is what it's called now, which is installed on all of our district PCs that uses a combination of artificial intelligence, behavioral detection, machine learning, so known and unknown threats can be anticipated and prevented. That'd be like your zero-day exploits. A lot of times there's no patches for certain software vulnerabilities, and this software aids us with those particular vulnerabilities, along with a lot of other things. We've also teamed up with, and this is the real part that I like, is the real-time SIM alerts, or some people call them SIM or SIEM, whichever you prefer. We have teamed up with Aspire Technologies, who actually helps us monitor 24/7 and helps mitigate and respond to these alerts in real time. The next one was Smart Deploy, which may not sound super exciting when I give you the 20,000-foot view of it, but it would save hundreds of man-hours if we ever had to re-image all of our PCs. This is a product that we use for desktop and laptop deployment, which allows us to quickly image and reinstall the operating system and the applications on all district computers on a continuing basis for routine maintenance, which is typically done yearly during the summer, or more importantly, in the event of a cyber incident.
So that leads us up to this year. It feels like we've gone through a whole decade, but really it's only 5 years ago we started this. So Rick, you've got a whole list here. Let's just blow through.
Yeah, so this is another big year. So during the 2022, 21, 22 school year, Next generation firewalls were installed, providing advanced machine protection from the outside of our network, along with easier management for IT staff. Remote support software was installed, which gives us improved security and auditing functions to ensure that all remote support sessions are authorized by the end user and recorded.
Just to put that in perspective, some issues that we deal with out of our office are a 2-minute issue. Instead of driving to Cumberland Head for 15, 20 minutes one way and then back, we might be able to solve an issue like this, but this ensures that the end user has authorized it, and we have a log that shows who was connected, when, and why.
So patch management, a quick story. About 2 hours before this meeting started, NSISAC sent out an email saying there's a vulnerability in the Chrome browser. This patch management software allows us to quickly be able to respond to something like that. By tomorrow morning, when the teachers come in, when they turn the machine on, that machine will scan quickly. It'll identify that there's a new Chrome browser to be deployed, and it will deploy it for us. Silent. We will no longer have to send out a message, everybody, this is the process for updating. So that's just a quick anecdotal. I won't get into the full details, but it allows us to just push out these updates on third-party software and Microsoft Windows updates, all of that all done centrally. And then this spring, the board approved the district's first ever incident response plan to provide direction in the event of a cyber incident, or in the event a cyber incident were to occur. And then, this is another exciting one, is in March, the culmination of 2 years of research and planning occurred with the board's approval allowing Superintendent Mannix the authority to execute a contract for B-Rate services with Day Automation for the installation of a new HP Aruba wired and wireless network, which is the same hardware manufacturer selected by the Department of Defense for the Pentagon.
And the last 2 items that I'll mention, passwords are probably the most useful but least enjoyable part of cybersecurity. And so this year we've really been trying to make things easier for the end user when they are doing a password reset. We've now enabled it so that they can get text-based notifications at home or at work or wherever they have to be to notify them when their password has been changed. They can facilitate that right from their cell phone if they choose. We've actually had quite a bit of adoption of that already. And then this is one that we actually started the year with, but if there's a ransomware attack, if it was a successful ransomware attack, there's a couple of things that would happen. First of all, the FBI will always advise any organization to never pay the ransom because, first of all, you're dealing with people that are less than honorable to begin with. There's no guarantee if you ever paid a ransom that you would get your data unencrypted or that they would unencrypt it and still not sell your data anyway. So this Google Workspace backup, this is a product called SysCloud. This backs up every single user continuously in the district. So from kindergarten students through the superintendent, it's backed up in the cloud, encrypted with very limited access, and if there was a cyber event where data was encrypted, we could simply delete the user's account and restore from backup remotely, again, saving hundreds and hundreds of man hours. When you talk to districts that have been through a cyber incident, it's months of them trying to get back on their feet, and a lot of that time is spent restoring data. So we have multiple systems in place to make that happen in the unlikely event should we ever become a victim. So that leads us to the future.
And I'm sure you guys are thinking,
And hopefully we're almost done.
what else could you guys possibly do?
What could you possibly do?
So we anticipate the wired and wireless network installation to start as early as July. We are being told there's a chip shortage. Right? Surprise, surprise. So we don't anticipate the full wired and wireless installation to be complete this summer. We are anticipating that, or hopefully anticipating that will be completed by the end of this current calendar year. We are also looking into, so the desktop encryption and penetration testing are both things that are referenced in the NIST cybersecurity framework. We have started looking into both of these processes and working on getting those implemented during this current school year, as well as the system log aggregation, which is, to me, is very, I guess it's probably the third most exciting. Well, actually, the wired network is pretty exciting.
Rick doesn't get out a lot.
I don't get excited that much either. So the system log aggregation, you think of all these systems we have in place, There's systems that we've talked about. There's systems that we haven't talked about yet. All of these are generating log files. Every time somebody logs onto a computer, every time a login is denied, every time somebody sends a print job, these are all logged. A lot of these logs are useless. We don't need them. But there are certain log files that are generated that can indicate there's something going on. We don't have the manpower or the ability to go through thousands of log files on a daily basis. So we're looking at either software or services that will notify us of those important indicators of compromise or attempts at compromise.
If they're showing anomalies, we would be able to see that. So getting back to the human element, training, absolutely key. And there's a piece of software through a most East Coaster that we'll be subscribing to starting next year called Mimecast, which is it is as much entertaining as it is instructional, and it covers a variety of cybersecurity topics for staff. We plan on making this part of the onboarding process, as these elements can be assigned to staff members, but they can also be used to remediate. This will also allow us to conduct phishing tests, and when someone fails and clicks on the bait, you can then assign remediation to that person through Mimecast so that you are addressing the problem and not just shuffling along. And then the bottom one, I think most of you can see it, it's called DMFA. And DMFA is desktop multi-factor authentication. So you're all familiar with multi-factor. This is basically a streamlined version of it, because it would be instead of just logging into the computer the way you normally would and then having to do the multi-factor authentication, the one login you would do would log you into the computer and do the multi-factor. So you're protecting the desktop computer, because consider this scenario. Somebody has multi-factor turned on, but their password to their computer is compromised. Somebody logs into the computer and then gets into the rest of their stuff. DMFA would stop them at the desktop level. So this is a layered approach. There is no silver bullet to cybersecurity. It is a layered approach that is the most effective approach. So we are almost done. What's left? So I'm going to show you three things. And what do they all have in common? They have the word ongoing in common. All three of these things are ongoing because there is no finish line to cybersecurity. The threat landscape is always evolving, always changing. As long as there is a dollar to be made by the bad actors who are trying to get our data, there will always be a threat that we'll need to address, and we need to be cognizant of that. We need to devote time and resources to that. So for the board and the superintendent and the budget process, we appreciate the resources we're given so that we can protect the district against those threats and hopefully put Beekmantown in the best position possible to reduce those liabilities. So with that, are there any questions whatsoever? I know that's a lot to take in.
We only broke our time by 4 minutes. I was trying to keep the area down to 20 minutes.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you.
So we talked last time about you guys are working on the last components for the business certification, right? And so do you think that by the end of this year you completely NIST certified or not?
So, do you want to? We're not specifically pursuing certification. We're looking at compliance. Okay. So I think we may be talking about two different things here. So to the extent possible, whether it's the physical, whether it's the layer 2, whatever components we are, we're trying to be compliant to the degree that we can with the time and resources that we have. As far as compliance, part of certification, I think that we wear, how many hats do we wear? I've lost count of the number. We don't have a specific cybersecurity officer or someone who's doing certification. We have to be generalists, unfortunately, because it's the nature of the job. We probably devote 10%, maybe. It depends on the time of the day.
The time of year, yeah. There's certain times of the year, September, October, November, we're running around like chickens, so we don't quite get to devote time to one thing. There's certain times of the year, like the spring is typically when we can kind of focus more on that.
But if that's something that the board desires, we certainly can pursue pursue whatever avenues are asked of us to do. I mean, perhaps it's better in the district's cap to say that we have this certification. I don't know of any other districts that have that.
But it would be good to, I guess, get an understanding of what the benefits are, right?
Sure.
And then obviously you guys are given this bandwidth, right? So how long it would take, the benefits, how long it would take, and the resources that you guys would need to get there.
Sure.
So at least we'd have a long-term target. And then obviously you guys are always continuing to make things better and doing all that. But it would be good to understand so that if you do come for an ask, because it's a part of this whole exercise,
sure,
then we can already see that this is the budget necessary, and we kind of have a hip pocket for you.
Gotcha. Makes sense. We can certainly look into that.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
And listen, Aaron, sorry, do you want to stay there because I'm next, and I'm giving my presentation time to part of the budget is grants. So Michelle, she's so good. So he's going to just give us a rundown of grants, which is actually a section of the budget, a big $10 million subsection of the budget. So I'll leave it over to our grants supervisor.
That's me. Hi, I'm Shelley Manchester. I am your grant supervisor, and I have a lot of experience doing this, and I have been asked to shorten this presentation down considerably so we can make our 7 o'clock deadline. So I am going to kind of skip through these and know that you have information on your slides, and you have my information if you need to ask anything or contact me as follow-up. So I won't go through my experience, but basically I've been doing grants for the district for the last 4 years. And since November, I've been an employee of the district. Prior to that, I was employed through BOCES. And with the large influx of grants that we've had to do over the last year, this was in answer to that. We currently have 17 active federal and state grant funds under which the district is a pass-through recipient, as well as additional funds like Year Up and several local industry grants. So there's a lot going on in grants. There's a lot to monitor, and this year it's a lot of money. And obviously each grant has a specific purpose, and there are rules for its use. So because of that, Mr. Mannix approached me about coming over here and working exclusively with Beekmantown, and I was more than happy to do it. And kind of end my grants career here. These are a list of the grant funds that are currently in play, and this is just this year. So as you can see, it's a large list, and there's a lot of money, and each one of those funds has its own rules, has its own budget, has its own limitations. And what I do is not only do I procure the grants and make sure that the applications go to state ed and get approved, and I work with the staff to do that, but once they are approved, I work with your staff to make sure that the grants are spent accordingly of the way that we have proposed to spend them. And also looking at prioritizing so that we're not leaving money on the table, or at least we're not leaving as much money on the table as we possibly can. We don't want to send money back if we can possibly help it. And normally I would have gone through these if I wanted to, so if you have questions, the other thing, so those are the formula grants, and we've gotten a lot of those this year. And then we also have some competitive grants, and they're one-time or continuing funds. And these awards are based on the availability of funds and also the competitiveness of the district. Right now, you still have a continuation of your extended learning time grant, which is over $3 million a year. We revamped that and got a waiver in the last 2 years because of COVID to make some changes to that program. And I think we're going to be applying for another waiver this year, but in hopes that it still will continue. I understand it is in the governor's budget. And we also applied for a National School Lunch Program cafeteria grant to put at least partially pay for a new serving line at Cumberland. And that grant is pending. We're waiting to hear on that one. So some things to consider when we look at grants. You have to remember that grants are designed by nature to be supplemental. and they're not designed to supplant local dollars. So they're not designed, it's not supposed to backfill so that you're spending less local dollars. They're actually supposed to be layered on top of. So when we do that, we have to remember that they're temporary by and large, and they are supplemental, and they're usually not appropriate to use for like a long-term hire. Grants should be used to enhance and improve existing programs or to initiate new programs. And when you initiate a new program using a grant, you really need to make sure that you have a plan to sustain the key components of that program so after the grant period is ended. And that can be difficult, but it is doable. So some considerations when we seek grants, we always want to start with the end in mind. What are the improvements, what goals do you want to see? Make sure that we're gathering the data, especially in this day and age, everything is data-driven. So we need to know, we need to have those surveys, we need to have those student performance things, we need to have that climate information. If we're doing something that has to do with facilities, we need the data on facilities, expenditures, all of that sort of thing. We have to take the data and we use that to identify our needs, and we then would do a resource inventory to see where the gaps are. So on the other side of needs is capacity, and grant funders want to know that the district has the capacity to actually do what they say they're proposing they're going to do. And so we have to be able to show both need and capacity to be successful. So then we identify strategies, and evidence-based is the thing now. Having a great idea all on your own, you better have something behind you that says at least it's promising to address the needs that you're talking about if you don't have an evidence research base for it. And then developing measurable objectives and realistic timelines. And then finally, we develop a budget. And a lot of people don't understand. They think, oh, you have this idea, you figure out how much it costs, and you write a grant accordingly. Budget's the last thing I do. It's the last thing I look at. Because once you have everything planned, we decide at that point. Then we measure and evaluate the process, the progress, and we always include stakeholders throughout the whole entire process. That's an expectation among funders these days. And lastly, we want to recognize and celebrate achievement. And how did they do? Did I learn that before 17? Yeah. Awesome. So if you have any questions, we have 5 minutes. If you have any questions, please let me know. You have my email. That is my personal phone number because I am semi-retired now, so I'm only in the district 2 days a week. But please feel free to talk to me.
We do have 5 minutes, so if you want to, if anybody has questions right now, you can ask a question.
If you don't, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So is it 5 of 7 right now? Because at 7 o'clock, I do have to start the 6:56.
Well, it's the sensors in the ceiling that detect, and then I can't override those.
There's some 5 minutes to spare.
Dan, do you want to take the time to talk about Mr. Lambert's?
Yes. So that was, first of all, I was going to say great job for both presentations, and since you're right there, please. Mr. Lambert was on Friday was in Albany receiving essentially the New York State Administrator, 21st Century Administrator of the Year award, was certainly well deserved. As the lady mentioned before, Beekmantown is a place where a lot of schools look for everything technology-based, and that's because of the commitment of the board, the teachers, the staff, administrators, but a lot of that drive, for that stuff to happen, it takes Rick and Gary was recognized. It was a great celebration. So congratulations, Gary. Thank you. So while I'm preparing here, these are something I'm going to go over. I have you guys to do, but I'm going to this is a budget snapshot that is being handed out. It's publicly available. Tries to break down all the slides and all the information into one easy sheet. The first sheet is, the front is the numbers comparing last year to this year. In the back are the new items this year and what we do last year. Yes, first. And Jen, you're going to do this with me, right?
I also have a set of handouts for guests too that perhaps want to copy of my presentation.
Seems like a big screen. So into 7, I'll start, and what you'll see today is a lot of familiar information, information we've gone over probably 3 or 4 times already this year. But there's 3 other slides that are particular to the breakdown of the budget, which is made publicly available immediately after this presentation.
That's actually been available.
Oh, it's already been available?
The packets themselves, yes.
Okay. And it is in the report. All right, so our 2022-2023 budget is finally a path to fully funded. Working long, hard with anybody in Albany or Washington who would listen to the plight of, say, 20 to 30% of the school districts in the state that were not fully funded, compared to a lot of school districts that were overfunded. And there was always this talk of safe, harmless, don't hurt those schools that are overfunded. And I used to sit there and go like, how is it just making us fully funded? And we're not there yet, but we have a significant increase this year, and it looks like the promise is there for next year. As politicians are making this promise, that the numbers look good. So the pathway to being fully funded at Beekmantown is real, and we're realizing it this year. Okay, so everything that drives us is our mission, and our mission is to make sure that our students, when they leave here, they graduate and they're ready to be quality contributors to society itself. And if that means they leave here and go right to the workforce, that's terrific. If they leave here and go to a community college, tech school, or college, we really want them to leave that one of those spots, wherever their end spot is, with the ability to have a job so that they can be that contributor to society, and very important to be contributors to themselves as well. So that's always our goal, something we talk about quite frequently. So this year in review, it's cool that I'm standing right here because it was in First part of this year, it was a beautiful day. We had our guest from Shine On, which is a STEM-based group that's really trying to help drive STEM across the country, but certainly STEM for young females across the country. And they selected Beekmantown to have a space station actually pipe onto our screen, and I hope Gary did a great job connecting with the space station. Then we had in-person learning, where not everybody was comfortable doing that early on. Sorry about the feedback. Our extended learning time opportunities were back in play this year, as we previously mentioned. This year we had a grant, and we had a grant to pay for students' college credits. Thank you. We lowered class sizes. We already had low class sizes. We lowered class sizes to help with the social distancing. We need to increase staffing because we had a really bad budget year just at the beginning of the pandemic, where we had $45,000, not $1 million, but $45,000, and we really in a budget really in a budget crisis. And then the governor said that he was going to, he said that he was going to cut 20% of the school funding in mid-year if Donald Trump was reelected. So that was a real issue that impacted a lot of staffing for us. We have maintained a really low tax rate compared to all of our neighbors in the county, and we're able to do a lot of great issues for our kids. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to come in 3 parts: our taxes, our supports, and our programs. So Jen, why don't you take over on taxes?
So taxes, our tax cap is like 74%, which I know we kind of beat that to death. We've all heard that. Our taxes remain under $17 per thousand. It was $16.72 in this current year. It looks as if we're going to be a significant decrease, actually. It looks like. I'll believe it when I see the final assessments come in. I'm a little pessimistic when it comes to that. But numbers did come out from the county last week with their preliminary assessments. Obviously, May is when you can go and protest against all of them. Some ones a little skewed to me, so I'm waiting for final results. But if I were to use their numbers, our tax rate would be down to $16.13. So a significant decrease. And as you can see, we'd love to show this off because our goal here is trying to stay consistent. So we don't want these big spikes in decreases. It's not good for the taxpayers, it's not good for the schools, it's not good for our employees. So consistency is what we're aiming for, and as you can see, 2.94, 2.56, 2.76, 2.68, 2.74. We're right in the ballpark of where we should be. So that's what we pride ourselves on, that's what we work hard for, and we'll continue to do that.
When we compare our districts, previously for years we were the highest free and reduced lunch number, which is the second column up next to the names. But now you see other districts have increased their free and reduced lunch number. That means kids that, I don't say that students that are living in poverty, but they're close at least to that poverty line, and they have an economic benefit for the lunches. And you see that we are the largest school in the county and in the BOCES, and that doesn't include our pre-K. We have the largest pre-K program in the county and the BOCES as well. So we're the largest. We're hovering around the highest free and reduced lunch rate, and we have a low tax rate, which has a really solid chance, based on the numbers as we know right now, subject to change, to have even a lower tax rate than our currently the lowest tax rate in the county.
Yeah, what are the asterisks?
I have bad eyes right now. So I think some of those numbers were like we were before.
They're not 100% equalized. So I don't remember last year Plattsburgh was, if we were only at 90%, so it was a different tax rate for Plattsburgh, and then Casey, Altona, and Beekmantown were a different tax rate. So the asterisk is the average of those different tax rates. So that's what it is.
Yeah. As I mentioned, fully funded. We just had a grants presentation. We have short-term stimulus aid, but our financial outlook is strong based on all the factors that we're mentioning now or previously mentioned. And a lot of people are always asking how this is going to impact everybody, Ken, so why don't you tell them how it's going to impact them?
As you were saying, this was my original estimate that I gave to you guys last board meeting, was the 1686. And that was with me taking into account certain increases, certain decreases. And then the numbers came in last week from the county. And if I were to use those as is, like I said, there are going to be people that fight their assessments. And so it'll all come out in August, like normal. If I were to use those numbers that they gave me last week, it would be 1650. So
no matter, it seems like, again, we don't control this number at all. We don't know the math. We can do the math on the numbers we're given. But it seems like we're still, no matter what, going to be under that $17 threshold. And then here are all of our grants, and I'm not going to go through this because we just went through them. But it's a total of $10 million. We're really proud of that. We're hearing that the federal Title I grants that are right around the middle of this page are going to go up significantly too as well. And that's all tied to spending, about why spending is, Shelley was saying, having a plan for that spending. And then here are some of the grant allocations, again, that we talked about, and how they have very specific rules on what you need to do with these particular grants and allocate certain amounts in some areas and certain amount in other areas. We started this probably 9 years ago, and this is our multi-year budget forecast. And it has, we've always been trying to track where we're going to be in subsequent years. So if you look last year, last year was a good budget year. When you looked at the coming year, we were looking to be in the red, about $700,000, which in a $45 million budget, $700,000 isn't a lot. It sounds like a lot, but it's not. Like a percent, it's a low amount. And then you see how that number compounds, and the next year it's almost double that. But this year, Jen, why don't you take it away where we are this year?
So as you can see, this is a direct result of the increase in our aid, making us whole again. And as you can see, it made a huge difference in our outlook for the next couple of years. So if we do in 23, 24, then get the remaining part to make us whole, and that is estimated into the calculation, into the aid calculation, this is where it will be. So you can see what a difference being fully funded makes to a school. It's huge. And that's with putting our staff back to where it was pre-COVID and before the scare with the governor and telling us he was going to cut everything. So this looks good and it's really promising. As you can see, next year is only $100,000 in deficit. So.
I know we've gone through this line by line before. We can do it again, but we do have a line for adversity, which could be an influx of people, could be an influx of people jumping over to health insurance. It could be crazy fuel prices, so we've increased our fuel prices as well here, but there's adversity in there as well. So, Jen made her best educated guess, and actually, do we get to lock in on those prices?
We did lock in on the rates, yeah. We actually reduced BOCES this year instead of the New York State contract. So we locked in rates, so we're hoping that we estimated correctly. You lock in and sometimes you lose because it can go the other way, but it's a gamble that I think this year was the right time.
And increase in materials and supplies, and a lot of it's not going to feel like an increase because we're getting back to the level we were at.
Right.
At that.
And we did put $100,000 in additional into materials and supplies.
Okay. And then our buses. So the 1 year we had such a bad run, we had to go out and ban our buses, and now we're going to pay off that ban, and we will pay for the buses in cash receipts of district's money. So I don't know if there's any questions on our multi-year budget. You can see next year It's $113,000, which out of a $45 million budget is less than 1%, way less than 1%. And then the subsequent year, you look at that number and you say, well, that's a pretty big number, which is right, but we're actually looking at next year at having the same, and again, we'll believe when we see it, we're not going to budget for it right now. What they're saying, we're going to have the same budget increase for Beekmantown next year that we have this year. And that will really smooth out those numbers. And we'll talk, what are we going to do from an education standpoint, from a community standpoint, where are we with taxes, and all those good conversations that we can really dig into. If there's any questions, just stop. If you do, I can always come back. Everybody just wants to know where's our money come from. This is a unique pie chart. This has always been a little lopsided where the state was paying less than the local share. So every year the locals were paying, like our Beekmantown taxpayers were paying a little bit more and the state was paying a little bit less. And now we're back to that almost even, actually a little bit less local share than the state picking up more of their share because we're becoming fully funded. And then we've also done a better job with that other category, which includes our grants, Medicaid, foster students, and others. All right. Let's talk about our supports. So we are fortunate to bring back a lot of supports this year. Our budget priorities, as you look at Lacey May, our therapy dog, are, as we've talked in this room many times, to bring back more physical education, high school, middle school science and math, and short, I don't know if it's a whole position in each, I guess it probably is. More pre-K through 12 supports for everybody within our school community related to health issues. And that could be mental health issues, it could be physical health issues, but we have a lot of health issues that we need addressing. And that might mean with administrative supports, that might mean with nursing supports, that might mean with counseling supports, and there's probably other supports I'm leaving out right there. Cool thing is we'll once again provide some youth camps for all of our kids, free of cost. All we ask is that they have a lunch with us or a breakfast. We're going to procure both mental health services and associate principals to improve support for our families, teachers, and students. And we know that high quality, timely mental health services for BS students will improve outcomes. So we really believe in a three-pronged approach that includes process, people, and temporary programs. And what we're talking about here is, and we talked about it yesterday, is how do you bring in mental health providers who are helping with crisis, who are here to help with a student in crisis. And why is that so important? Because when a student's in crisis, the people we have employed to give counseling for those, for all of our students that have it on an IEP or have it on a 504 or just need it, they can't provide that service or that counseling for them because they're working on the crisis. So if we have somebody else to handle the crisis, we can get back to a better process of working with our students and having them understand better skills, better strategies to not put themselves in crisis. I saw an analogy recently where they said, if we're always worrying about pulling people out from the drowning from the river, we're missing the fact that they're jumping in and down to the other end of the river. So what we're trying to do is convince kids give the kids the strategies not to put themselves in that situation where they need a crisis intervention. And that help. And one of the ways you do that is through counseling. So help with the crisis. Well, let's get our counselors in, focus on counseling, and not interrupt them from their counseling. And that those people that will be here, hopefully that's a temporary fix for a crisis. Also, we can hopefully provide some type of adventure-based care, which will be available here at school. That's a little difficult because civil service doesn't have that particular thread, which we need to apply for them and have it approved in Albany. But we'd like to have an adventure-based counselor here that can work with K-12, everybody, and addressing just the whole child. So that's a huge priority for ours. Other huge priorities are kind of wrapped into some of that. Nursing aides, they're also not on the civil service position description list, but we're working with Clinton County Civil Service to add aides. Currently, we can only have them in nursing homes our nurses need some support with all the work that they're doing. We're going to remain with 3 security or hall officers or SROs. They have different titles. Integrate the co-teaching supports. So at every grade level and every subject area, we have co-teachers, and we don't have a great coach or support for those co-teachers. Sometimes it works fabulously. Other times we need a little support and have people figure out how to do that a little bit better. So we're going to work on that to give our teachers what they need and our students what they need. Middle school student supports. So I know I always mess this up, but I think we're going to be implementing the Thrive Room this year. For middle school, elementary administrative supports, as we mentioned here many times. Prior to this year, when Mr. Villa has come on, we had 2 elementary schools that are one's above 500 students every year, and a lot of adults in there as well. And the other one was just below 500 students every year, which are bigger than some of the districts I just showed you. And there's no assistant in those buildings, and we need that support. Smaller class sizes, intervention services, mental health supports, ME2 increases. We've talked about ME2 here, but that's managing expressive emotions. Holly, help me with that one. Managing and expressing your emotions. And cybersecurity improvements, we have a budget line for some of the things that Rick was talking about. And then a head night custodian, which is a great theory right now. We're having a hard time finding anybody who wants to be a custodian, but one of the things we believe we need to get back to is having somebody here at night. So when I say here in the district, and going and helping our new custodians learn the ropes, but also keeping an eye on that workforce. It's needed, especially with such a high turnover. We have a lot of program help in daily consumer science, cooperative, a lot more engagement with BOCES and cooperative services. Special education teachers are looking for reading intervention, foreign language in middle school is an issue. There's Thrive, the college credit courses. So we mentioned that's in a grant. This year, we're going to put that in the budget, so that's not something we receive every year. We're kind of we're actually going to put that in the budget, so it'd be something that would need to be cut out of subsequent budgets to have that go away. We may be asking, we're going to have to take a look at our performance and how many kids actually took the assessment. We may be asking for a little skin in the game there from kids, just to make sure they go there and they have value to that. But we really want to make it affordable so our kids can come to school, obtain college credits, and be thinking about what do I want to do. And if they don't want to go to college, that's completely fine. But if they do, we want to give them a leg up. CVS classes, and a lot of people were very concerned about whether we had in our budget the free lunch and breakfast program. And while it's not really in our budget, we do subsidize the cafeteria every year when needed. Sometimes they are at a positive cash flow, which they might be right now. At the moment they are. So they were at the positive cash flow, there's no budget that they needed, and sometimes we do need to subsidize that. So that's not going away. That's a great program. But here are the 3 new slides, or 4 new slides. And this, Jen, why don't you go through these slides with everybody?
Yeah, so this is the summary page. This kind of goes through the 3 component parts of the budget. You have your admin, your program, and your capital. We're proposing a $49 million budget to the public. You can see it's a 6.38% increase over the previous year's budget. And it breaks down each individual category, which the next slide will show you. I believe are we doing program first?
Yeah, I think we are doing program first, but I just want to point out that if you look at the 6%, over 4% of that 6% is from regular programs.
Yes.
With kids and teachers. So you're not looking at it first.
Yep. So this is the breakdown for admin, individual lines. You can see the percentages are different here because this is comparing the admin in and of itself, not comparative to the whole budget. So it is correct, believe it or not. So if there's any questions on the admin, there's no big increases or decreases. It's pretty consistent. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's pretty tight. You have it in the portal.
It's in the portal.
Yeah.
And it's available in our office. And where else is it available, Jen?
We have hard copies in the district, and I think they're in all the offices. I'm not sure. I actually have an extra copy here if somebody needs an entire packet.
But as you saw, the admin increases.
Yeah, overall budget, the admin increase was only 0.99%, so 1%.
Here's the program.
And program. So this is where the main majority of your monies are going for the increases, and that's getting those teachers back into, all the things you just listed and went through, Mr. Mance went through, were reading interventions, the counselors, the ME2, that's all program stuff. So the majority of the money is going into program increase. Again, you'll see the big swing there. It's just we had a very long time attendance officer retire, so I don't want you to think that we cut the attendance officer. We didn't, but she retired, and now there's a new person in there, so there was a big swing there for attendance.
It's a decline.
It's a decline, yeah. So that's the reason for the big swing. We didn't cut anybody or anything like that. And I don't think there's really any. The salaries, obviously, because we're implementing new people, are going to increase. So we have a lot of new positions. That's our hope to fill them, but as we all know, we're struggling to fill them.
A lot of them are new again, too.
Yes, new again, because we've been looking. So we're going to keep them.
And our capital budget.
Yeah, and the capital, again, there's not a whole lot of change in the capital. 1.28% overall on our budget. No big swings. The buses did go up because we're buying 4 instead of 3, which is our normal protocol. We do 3 and 4, 3 and 4, 3 and 4. So that's all normal.
Buses went up, fuel oil was up.
Fuel oil.
Significantly.
Yep. And those are really the big items. Electricity actually is down because of our solar. Telephone was up a little bit, but
Is it that's on the garbage?
yes. As you all know, we have one vendor. We go out to bid every year, and there's only one person. It's where we are. It's the way it is. Prices have skyrocketed, and our hands are kind of tied. There's nobody else to go to. So that has increased a lot dramatically. And I have a feeling the bids went out, I believe, when they come back, I think they're going to be higher than anticipated with all those going up. So a little bit out of our control, unfortunately. But it is where we live.
And Jen, today in the paper, they kind of confused a couple items in their article. So I know we added clarity to them, but this a few times. I don't know what happened in the translation, but why don't we just be clear on how this works?
Yeah, so the capital outlay is actually, it's not a capital project, it's a capital outlay which is built into our general fund budget, $100,000 that's built into our general fund budget to get miscellaneous things done that need improvement. So next year we're looking at, I don't think we'll complete the stores, but we're going to be close, and to do the portable bathrooms for the outside events. That is the goal. They're working on it now. I think we're in this New York State process for approval, so if it goes through at budget time, we'll be on board, and they're hoping that they'd actually be done for August. I'll believe that when I see it, the way everything is right now. The actual units, the bathroom units themselves are supposed to be here by the end of the month. But then we have the plumbing. This project is really to get the plumbing going and the cement pad and the groundwork.
They're all portable, but the envision is like they're there.
Yes.
They're going to be permanent.
They are, but they are portable. It's kind of like a camper hookup. Okay. So they actually hook up into our septic system. But like a camper, you can move it if you so chose. But if you're hooked up, you're complete. Yeah. So there's flushing toilets, there's running water, there's going to be heat in them. They're a structure that's going to be going up. But if need be, they could always be moved.
So you could move in the winter time
yes.
If it comes really cold, you're not using that spot.
Right. But we'll probably just flush out the lines like you would a camper. Flush out the lines so nothing freezes, and then they're ready to go for the next year. So there's six buildings. One will be for disabled with a ramp and all that. So we'll be ADA compliant. Everything. There's going to be some groundwork done too, where they're going to be placed. There'll be some asphalt, so it'll make it easier for anybody that was in a wheelchair. Because right now it's not so easy. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible. And that's what a capital outlay is. It's to do smaller projects within your general fund budget.
We did increase the capital outlay budget line a little bit because it looks like the legislature next year is going to, or this year, will increase that dollar amount to maybe even $300,000 or $350,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we increased it a little bit this year so that next year we don't have to take the whole bite of that increase.
But if that does increase, it would be very beneficial to the school. Capital outlays tend to go through the state much quicker to get things done. And $100,000 does not, unfortunately, does not go very far. So if they were to increase that, we could really start to do some maintenance, a little bit bigger maintenance projects within this.
Generators, small roofing,
yes,
issues like that.
It would be very beneficial. And it does look like they're really pushing it, so I'm hoping it does really increase.
Our busing proposition, as Jen mentioned, this year we're on buying 4 buses. Some years, we did a study, I think President Marin mentioned this, I think it was 8 years ago, we had a study here and they said, based on your current enrollment and the amount of mileage you put on the buses, you should look at buy 3 buses, then 4, and then 3, then 4. Since then, we've had a significant increase in the number of students that are attending in the town, but also because of like ELT, we put on a lot more mileage going on different field trips or different going to different events, including increasing our sports and extracurricular offerings. But nonetheless, this year we'll do again a 4 cycle anyways. But some years you may see 4 just based on mileage and use. We receive basically 75% of that as well in state aid. So we're asking our public to support the transportation proposition of not to exceed $500,000 with us receiving 75% back in state aid. And then Jen, why don't you go through the capital reserve?
Okay, so the capital reserve, we are looking to do a project in 24, 25. We will have one coming off of our books. It won't have an impact on our budget per se, but it's always good when one comes off to begin another one because it usually means you're due for the next one. I know we've been talking about it at length in our operations committee to get this started as soon as possible. This, with the additional monies coming in where we're at, to take $600,000 out of fund balance and put it into reserve makes sense. We have it. It would be that much less we have to take from our taxpayers when we do the capital project, which we know we're going to have to do. A lot of what we talk about in operations committee meeting is actually the bus garage, as you know, before. It needs some work. It needs a lot of work. So if we were to do this, it would be set aside for that capital project that's going to be happening in the next 3 years.
And that work is at NIM too. I want to just bring that up. When we were looking at the last capital project, they said even then, like, look, you might even put $3 million into this, and you're patching it. So you really need to take a long, hard look at what are you going to do with this bus garage. So right now, one of the suggestions to the operations committee, I think, was strip it down to the studs and then kind of rebuild it back up. We haven't adopted that. That's I think the latest suggestion. So that particular place has been on our radar. Additionally, one of the things that came out in a thought survey, and it actually came through in one of the grant surveys back about a year ago, was having a more accessible playgrounds for our kids, which is a great addition. So we've done a lot of work with that, and that would go through. A lot of that work has to go through a capital project because you have to anchor things into the ground, and it's dangerous if you don't do it right. So we can come back to any of this time. So this is the budget presentation, and we can dig into any item right now, whether it's the public or the board. I go back to the page and answer any questions you may have. Sure.
So with all the grant money that was done, like the example with the playground and getting, improving that, is that not something that we could use some of the grant money for?
So we put money aside for like pre-K playgrounds because you could buy like little types things and they're having your lawn almost, right? But some of the work you would still, no matter what, like for like a 4th or 5th grade, 3rd grade playground, it has to. It's our understanding that it has to go through a capital project just because it has to be anchored and engineered.
Right, it has to be SED. It requires that.
It requires SED work.
Not that you can't use grant funding for it, but you don't get out of having to go through SED to have capital. One doesn't supplant the other. Just because you're using capital money doesn't mean you can say, oh, I don't have to go through SED, it doesn't have to be approved.
No, but I'm just saying, like, you
I'll
know,
piggyback.
yeah, like, is there a way to?
Yeah, so that's why we have the expert over here.
Yeah.
But we have put money, oh, go ahead.
So one of the things with most of the grant funds that we've gotten is they really are to prevent, remediate, and help solve problems that have occurred because of the COVID pandemic. And while we can make the case for many, many things to do that, including some of the playground equipment, particularly for our pre-K students, it adds that extra layer. And when you add that on top of the fact that we do have to get approval from the federal government, from the state government, then we start running into timeline issues because we only have so long to spend that money, and these capital projects tend to take longer. So what we have been doing is we've been kind of shifting things into grant budgets to free up money on the other side to use different funds from the district for that project.
Yeah. SED, a normal, typical capital project through SED takes 6 to 8 months to get approved. Then you have to go out to bid. Then you have to award bids. Then you have to so it's really before you get started, it's a year into it. And most of these grants are you have to spend in the middle. Very difficult, unfortunately.
Well, we did do some with preschool equipment. Stuff that doesn't require capital project, we have done. And we purchased some special education, adaptive things. We're looking at that, doing more of those purchases. So we are utilizing as much as we can.
Thank you.
Any other questions about any others?
Yeah, the cash reserve funds, in order for that to be spent, they're going to do a large group of spending the money. Does that have to be taxpayer approved?
Taxpayer approved, absolutely.
Okay.
So that's to be taxpayer approved, you know when, taxpayer approved, you know when.
So we're not going to wind up with the problem we had years ago where we had about $10 million in the reserve fund, and then the state come after Beekmantown for the way they squandered the money.
We're not going to squander anyone.
Because we were supposed to have $4 million, I was looking there. We were supposed to have $4 million, and they didn't want us to have, they found out that after 6, and you're only supposed to have a certain percentage.
So you're when you say squandering money, you're talking about the time when there's a big write-up, and then the next thing you know, we're at a budget deficit. That's the squander you're talking about, right? Yeah. We're not going to do that. So if we just go back, here we'll talk squander for a second.
I think it was before your time.
It was.
It was before your time.
Way before your time.
Try not to squander. Okay, so if you take a look back, you had a big, huge budget. Just look at that number, 1277, 992. Those are big numbers, right? And then right about 2008 or 9, you had that article in the paper. And one year we were at 0, which that can happen, right? That can happen again. But then we gave back. That's the squander. So you're at 0. I remember there was 5 years of 5% salary increases and a whole bunch of other things. There was like a perfect storm of events, and then you had a decrease, and then they had to go out and ask right after you came that article in the paper, some 12 to 18 months later, you're asking taxpayers for 12.24%.
And didn't one budget, it didn't pass.
Yeah, sorry, that was that budget. They still had to go out. They had to narrow that down from 12.24 to 8.78. So that's that kind of mistrust that Jen just talked about, where we like that leveling, the consistency there. And I can promise you that the people that I've worked with that sit in these seats are not. You haven't seen anything like, you haven't seen squandering. If anything, we keep asking for more and more and more money from other places.
That's also before we implemented 5-year projection.
Yeah, where is that? Yeah.
So we had these issues, and to say there were a lot of discussions as to why we wouldn't. There was some resistance, and finally we did. And like Jen was talking about, a capital budget was off, and another one ready to go to take care of things, not have a surprise. So it balances out the budget, so it's consistent.
That's our main focus. No big disclaimers. Because, like I said, it's not good for us, it's not good for the taxpayers, it's not good for the employees, it's not good for anybody.
And we want to try to be transparent because, like, as you mentioned before, I think they said this is going to be done. People were saying this is going to be done, right? And so we want to always be looking, and we're making assumptions. We're making, next year, our assumptions, we have, some information. 2 years out, we really don't know, but we make these historical assumptions to help us budget.
So I remember being back at a conference in one of those years, and I went specifically to see a business manager do a presentation from one of the big 5 districts, and they had this one thing there. And I got the information and sent it into the district, and the only answer I got was, no, we're going to do the other thing. So eventually we did.
I mean, this is not an exact science by any means, but it does give a very good picture of what.
Other questions about any of this in the budget? Nothing else. Okay, well, I can't ask. Do you have a question?
No. Do you have to be full budget?
Oh, the whole
Yeah.
So we do ask you that you come out and vote. Ask for you to vote for board members and ask you to vote on our budget, which is it Tuesday? Yeah.
I mean, all the numbers, with all the people that are running, is the press going to have anything in the paper on them saying anything? I know years ago, there used to be meetings, and the people that were running for the board would come to the meeting. The BTA used to host that, and they did nothing.
Yeah.
Last year, when I ran, they did do that. Was it last year? The press actually called me at my house.
I hope so.
Yeah, and asked
So,
questions.
12 people, now that's,
Oh,
but you're still voting, even on some of the ones that have a term? You're just voting on, there's 7 new ones.
There's 3 people. Every year there's 3 because
Yeah.
of a 9-member board. And then there were 2 people who left who had unexpired terms. So you're voting for a portion of the time. And I think Chelsea did the press column and asked for information on other people running, so they might be reaching out.
Yep.
They always reach
There's a lot of people running in a lot of places, not just here. So there's a lot of work for them to do, the press. So I just thank everybody, and if you have more questions, we're happy to go through it. There's that sheet I handed out, hand that out around community, just mailboxes.
Riley's not here. Audit Committee. Nicole couldn't be here tonight, so who wants to do update on the Audit Committee?
Jen, you're up.
We did February, March financials.
We talked about the budget, actually.
We did talk a little bit about the budget. We asked if there was any questions from.
And lunches, we talked about
Lunches. Oh, yes, and Roxy did want me to mention, to make sure everybody still knows, we are still in the free lunch program.
Okay.
And I asked her this morning, we're through 25, 26 for approval. Because I guess there's been some concern from parents out in the public that they thought we were losing that. So we're not, just so everybody knows. Yes, we talked about cafeteria and that they were in the black. I think we discussed that. Yeah.
We talked about Chromebooks. I thought one of the things we talked about was we had purchased Chromebooks.
That was of our big purchases.
It was one of our big purchases. Next time we do it, please don't.
I can bring it with me.
Yeah. Take one of those out.
All right, let's continue. All right, minutes as presented.
Can I just say
Oh,
one
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, my mic is off. Just an update on the Hall of Fame. We will be meeting we need to get a date this month to elect the class. I know some community members have asked. And so just so the community is aware, the committee will be electing a new class, most likely this month, so people can start planning for that fun event in the fall.
And date of raffle?
Determine that. It's going to happen before the end of the school year.
Yes.
Sure it is. Sure it is. All right. Next section is the consent agenda. Minutes. Resolve the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education to approve the following minutes. Motion?
Motion.
Terry, second.
Second,
Cheryl. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education to approve the CSC, CPSC, and 504 recommendations dated 5/10/22. Motion?
I'll motion.
Carrie?
I'll second, Crystal.
Crystal? Any discussions on it? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Personnel. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education that the following resolution on this consent agenda, resignations and appointments, be and hereby approved. I need a motion. Cheryl. Second.
Second, Kim.
Kim. Dan, do you want to talk about any of this here? Nope. No back. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Miscellaneous. On page 7. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education that the following resolutions on this consent agenda: unsealing and opening the ballot boxes, side letter of understanding, summer school, and MOA ELT for assistant superintendent of school special services, be it and hereby approved. Need a motion?
Motion,
Courtney. Second.
I'll second.
Crystal. Any questions or discussion on this?
I have just
Sure.
one question about that. So, when we do the school voting, we do it here and everything. And I know you, like the polling people for the county, you hire people to help out the poll workers
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. But do you have certain people that count it? Or the machines count it out? So do you have certain people that,
Machine counts it out.
but do you have certain people, like, say there's a ballot that's not, maybe it's not correct or something, or they,
So what happens is it goes to the machine. The machine it will let's say they didn't say that by accident left everything blank.
yeah.
It'll spit it back out and say this will not be counted unless I forget exactly how it reads on this. Something is done. So Mr. King usually is at the voting machine and he'll say, "Yep." He'll say, "Did you want to pass this ballot?" And the person can hit pass, or they can take it back and go correct it.
Would that happen too if they did a write-in and stuff?
If they did it right and they get it wrong, it's just an invalid ballot. It doesn't click back and say, "Hey, go do this right."
Well,
Yeah, so I
yes.
know write-ins are.
If they do too many,
specifically have to be.
Yeah, if they do, if they vote for too many,
Write it in the wrong spot.
members, it will reject it, and it'll ask the person if they would like to still submit. If they do still submit it, it's going to be an invalid ballot. But if they take it back, you can take it back 3 times.
Yeah.
3 times to correct it, and after the 3rd time, you don't get a new ballot.
And my other question was, if you get the absentee ballot in the mail, but you really wanted to come vote, then there's no problem.
No, you just come in and vote. Yeah, okay.
Can't vote twice.
No, I know.
Just kidding.
The reason I asked is some people actually got ballots in the mail today, a couple friends, and they wanted to come personally and couldn't understand why they got the ballot in the mail.
That's through the county, get that list through the county. So
Yeah.
if they don't want to get that anymore through the mail, they can just call the county and
Okay.
ask to be taken off the list. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good questions. Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Financial. Resolved that the superintendent of schools recommends to the Board of Education that the following resolutions on this consent agenda, financial reports and transfers be and are hereby approved. Motion, please.
Motion, Chairman.
Second? Cheryl. Any discussion, questions?
That roll is
Yeah.
Yes.
The roll call vote, the names are wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, I'm not even there.
You're so picky. You're so picky. All right. Go ahead. Let's do the roll call.
Douglas Beebe,
Yes.
Jeremy Connors,
Yes.
Kimberly Erlin,
Yes.
Patty LaFlemme,
Yes.
Cheryl McKenzie,
yes.
Ed Marin,
Yes.
Courtney Miller,
Yes.
Crystal Palmer,
Yes.
Nicole Cooper.
All right. Motion passes. Additional items to discuss. July reorganizational meeting.
Yeah, it's good to select that date now. I mean, we could wait to June.
I mean, the one comment is if 5 people
Yeah,
are
that's
up
new.
for election, it potentially doesn't make sense to choose it today. If
Yep.
there's 5 regular people, but have an awareness that it needs to be done within a very specific time period.
Yeah, before the 15th. So
Right.
we can wait. It's normal business. But you're right. There's one other item. Why don't we just go to the question that I couldn't quite understand via email today, Cheryl? I don't know if I answered it or not.
I responded back, but unfortunately I had a crazy day, so I didn't respond for like half an hour before coming here. So I was just, what was provided in the portal or the shared drive was enrollment numbers for the elementary schools by grade and classes. But then the middle school and the high school just gives like
The aggregate, right.
And so I was just curious, looking at elementary, I was like, I wonder what the numbers are for the classroom sizes in elementary and high school, middle school and high school. And I know that they have different types of classes, like labs or just lectures and whatnot, but I was curious, like, where we stood there and, talk about, like, we're lower than average in certain respects, and are we the same for the middle school and high school? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, since we've been talking about this a lot, we engaged in an analysis of student enrollment projections, class sizes, and program staffing. And it's a pretty comprehensive review of that state data. So we'll put that into the board portal, okay? And it'll be helpful to, really not talk about what we think, again, not what we're, but what we know, what are the real numbers. So this is what it looks like. It'll be in the portal before you know it.
Thank you.
I anticipated that question.
All right. I do want to ask just one note on the additional comments, items for staff and your administration or anybody. I have a CVS board meeting tomorrow, so if you guys have any questions or something that you need to have come through Dan, or let me know. All right. Budget hearing.
Which we've already done.
We've already done. Okay, we have an executive session with no decisions after that.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
But are we going to vote on what we discussed earlier?
Oh, sorry. We could do that now.
Yeah.
So do you have the resolution from?
Right.
Yeah.
So then we can say in our second session, there'll be no decision after.
Send you email right now. So why don't we? So we can be transparent here. We're going to have action on a settlement agreement at the end of executive session to close out the capital project. Okay.
Yeah. Well, since we already talked about it, let's just do the resolution now.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah,
We
let's,
have it available?
yes.
We have the resolution available?
So I thought he had sent it to her, so we're contacting him right now, and like you said, so we don't.
Let me see if I have it.
Yeah. I'm checking too. Because I didn't remember, I asked him if he had sent it to Chelsea, because I didn't remember seeing it.
Yeah. All right, we'll just do that afterwards then. I don't want to waste anybody else's time.
Right.
All right. Resolve the Board of Education appoint Ms. Palmer
I will.
as clerk pro tem for this meeting. A motion? Kim? A second? Cheryl. The motion passes. Now, resolve that the Board of Education enter an executive session to discuss the proposed pending or current litigation, the medical, financial, credit, or employment history of a particular person or corporation, or matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or persons or corporation, and the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real estate property, or the proposed acquisition, sale, or exchange securities, but only when publicity would substantially affect the value of these things. Motion.
I'll motion, Crystal.
Second?
I'll second
Patty, any questions or discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye? Okay, we'll go into executive session.